Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group's main meeting. So this evening, we are fortunate enough to have Kathi Kellenberger talking to us about technical writing. Please take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm here to talk to you tonight about building your brand with technical writing. And a little bit about me. I work for Redgate Software. I'm the editor of Simple Talk, and I'm also a DevOps advocate. And really the most important thing to know about me is that I'm a lifelong learner and teacher. Those are really what's driven everything I've done for many years. So you may be wondering why Kathi can write, why is she the person to talk about technical writing? And here's one of the reasons. I think there's like 11 books on there that I've either written the entire book or written at least one chapter. And I'm right now working on the 4th edition of the first book up in the upper left corner, beginning T-SQL. So I'm working on the 4th edition of that right now. Plus I've done blogging. My poor blog is kind of neglected right now. And also lots and lots of articles, mostly on SQL Server Central, on Simple Talk. I wrote one article. It was kind of a bucket list item for me a long time ago for SQL Server Magazine. If you remember that, if you've been around long enough to remember getting SQL Server Magazine in your mailbox every month. So that was kind of a bucket list. And I tried to find that article a couple weeks ago and could not find it. So I guess it doesn't even exist online anymore. So I want you to think about whether or not you are a writer yourself. Have you written a book? Now, I can't see you, but typically if I'm in a session like at a SQL Saturday, I'll have a couple of hands go up, not many. And then I can ask, what about writing an article? Have you written an article? Probably more people have written articles than they have books or contributed to books. And then the next is blogs. Lots of people have blogs. Every month in the Women in Tech newsletter, I try to feature a woman in our SQL Server community, in particular, our data platform community, a blog by one of the women in the community. And what I've found is that even though a lot of people started writing blogs, it seems like they're not getting less popular as far as reading. It seems like people kind of have abandoned them in the last couple of years. So their blogs are out there and then they just kind of move on to other things. Documentation at work. This is a really important thing. I remember when I was a DBA for about 10 years, I documented and documented and documented because I did not want to stay at that job forever. I wanted to be able to move on someday. Email. Probably every single person that I'm talking to right now has written an email. And what I found is that once I started writing articles and books, I started paying more attention to my email messages to make sure that they were clear. I'm not 100% successful. There's often miscommunication in the email, but I think I'm doing much better than I did at one time. Social media. Lots and lots of people are writing things on social media. What I really hate is that I put some kind of response on Twitter or Facebook and then don't realize that I've made some kind of a grammatical error or misspelling or left a word out or something. And so that really annoys me that I don't slow down. It's something that seems like it's very fast. You don't slow down to even take a look and make sure that it's correct. And I have done a lot of editing on Facebook posts to make sure that they are what I actually said. So I'm sure that everyone that's listening falls somewhere in this list of different types of writing. And what I'm going to be talking about during this session are the top 3. books, articles, and blogs. So why might you write? Another thing that I do a lot of times, and maybe we can do this, if anyone wants, I'm not sure how the question's going to work, Kevin. If anybody wants to put some ideas of why they might want to write, become a writer, and let me know what those ideas are.
Sure. So
if that's
while people are
possible.
doing that, I will warn that there's about a 10 to 20 second delay, meaning that it'll take a few seconds before people are able to hear you, and then they'll take a second to write.
Okay. Yeah, that's
But
fine.
while they're doing that, let me try vamping by throwing out an idea.
Okay.
I want to have something to put on my resume.
Okay, that's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. What's really cool is if you go for a job interview, and at the job interview, they say, you know what? We were looking up how to do something the other day, and an article that you wrote came up. So that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, Anders
That
in
is,
chat says to learn the topic.
to learn
TG
the
says
topic.
to share knowledge.
Yes.
Probably not for the fat royalties.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Does
yeah,
that sound
those
like it?
look
Go
like some
ahead.
answers.
So I'll go ahead and give you my reasons. The reasons that I came up with, they are not, maybe some are more important than others as far as I'm concerned. First of all, establishing your brand. And that's part of what my talk is about. Getting known as a certain personality, a certain, I guess what I'm trying to say is, for myself, I want to be somebody that people can count on. People will know that I am nurturing and people can learn from me. And that's kind of my brand, that Aunt Kathi brand. So, you want to, by writing, you help establish that. How, for example, any company out there has their brand, and, things can change over time, especially in the way things move so quickly nowadays. But you have different companies establishing a brand that, you want people to feel and think of a certain way when you think of that brand. I know in today's world, things change so quick. People are getting mad at all these different companies or liking these different companies just for all kinds of different reasons. But in general, writing can help establish how people think about you in the community. Another thing is that writing might lead to becoming an MVP, or what I like to call a SQL celebrity. So the first time I ever even heard about MVP was back in, I believe it was 2004 at Pass Summit in Florida. And Wayne, was it Wayne? Shoot, I can't think of his last name. He was the president of Pass, and this big guy with the big beard, but now big beards are popular, but back then they weren't quite as popular. And he had a session on how to make a name for yourself. And I went to that session, and he talked about writing, and he talked about presenting and answering questions, and talk about becoming an MVP. And I sat there in that session, and I'm like, I can do that. I could be an MVP someday. So I feel like for myself, I'm going to write no matter what, whether I'm an MVP or whether I'm not an MVP, whether it's, that part of my life is over. I'm probably still going to continue to write because I love it so much. But this is one of the benefits. Career opportunities. Kevin and I talked about that a couple minutes ago. It's interesting that when you go like for a consulting, interviewing for a consulting engagement or interviewing for a job, and they bring up that they've read some of your work, that's really kind of cool. And I think that gives you a little bit of an edge as far as getting that opportunity. And, you can put that on your resume as well. I had a really strange situation, went to a resume workshop when I was looking for a job about 3 years ago. And the person leading the workshop looked at my resume and said, "This is junk. This is horrible." And I did have a lot of, books and different things that I'd done. And so the two people leading the workshop looked at it and said, "It's horrible. It's horrible." And then he stopped and he said, "Can we talk afterwards? Because I think I have some opportunities that you'd be great for." So I thought that was kind of funny. But you can put those on your resume. But at least in the one workshop that I went to, they did not like that on there. I'm not quite sure why, but they did want me to go look for jobs with them. Giving back to the community. This is probably the top reason that I write. When I write, especially like my beginning T-SQL books, I can imagine people all over the world learning T-SQL from me. And that's why I do that. This was a book, and like I said, I'm on my 4th edition of this. This was a book that was inside my heart. It was in my brain and my heart, just waiting to come out. And I've learned so much from others over the years, like Halen Delaney or Itzik Ben-Gon, or, tons and tons of people who present and write books or write articles or blog posts. Almost every question I ever have, I can find the answer online. Somebody's talking about it. And this is a way I can give back or pay it forward for all the help that I've gotten over the years. So I would say that's probably my top reason. Learning more. Somebody mentioned that as well. You think you know something. You think you know a T-SQL function inside and out. But then when you go to show it to somebody else, that's when you realize, hey, wait a minute. There's a parameter I didn't remember, or there's something else goofy about it that I had never thought about. So I just went through the second, or actually wrote the first draft, which was really some of it was new material, some of it's updates. Then it went to a tech reviewer, and this guy is super smart, really into internals. And I got it back the 1st of August and had to go through the entire book again. And there were a few things I learned from that tech reviewer. And so it's like you're always going to be learning more. There's always something else that you didn't think of. You got to dig deeper, whether you're presenting or whether you're writing a blog post or whatever. You pretty much have to go back and take a look at the documentation and try to break it and see just, really what else that it does. And not to make money. You can make some money. You can make some, but you're not going to quit your day job unless you come up with some really fantastic bestseller. And even then, you're probably not going to be able to quit your day job. And it's worse now. When I first got started with writing, I did make a lot let me go back to the book I'm talking about. Maybe a lot of you have seen it. This book on the lower left-hand corner, that Professional SQL Server 2005 Integration Services. I wrote 2 chapters in that book. It was a bestseller among the data platform community. And I did make a lot of money. I made about $10,000 for writing those 2 chapters. And I don't know that there's anything else. I'm sure there's not, that I ever made that kind of money again. That was really, really, it was a different time. And it was also the first integration services book out, so it sold really fast. And I'll talk more about how the compensation for books work as we go along. So not to make money, however, I put my royalties into a vacation fund. So I've got some money for, going out for dinner, or I used to, or, taking some weekend trips, things like that. But it's not going to make me rich. So how in the world do you get started? I suggest starting with blogging. And blogging is really easy to get started because um, you don't have to be accountable to anybody, and you can start for free. And the things you can start with are problems you have solved. So the very first thing I wrote, which was not a blog, actually, it was in 2004 or five. It was an article for SQL Server Central, which was dealing with removing the, now I can't think of what, it's a security thing, those administrators that you automatically get in that allowed all of the admins at the firm to be able to get into the SQL server, and I didn't really want that to happen. I can't think of what it's called, but I had to figure out how to set the security so I didn't lock myself out, and different things that I came up with. So I thought, well, this would be a cool article. So I submitted it, and it took me like a month before I felt confident for turning in. But typically, I think for blogging, people will write things that are not quite as formal, and they'll go ahead and publish. And I can't see ahead on my slides because I don't have presenter view. But one of the things I recommend is, especially if you're first getting started, is to go ahead and write the blog and then don't publish it. Wait a day or two and then go back and look at it with fresh eyes, because problems with the writing will pop up at you. And I also suggest either reading it out loud or printing it out and reading it, or having maybe your spouse take a look at it or a friend take a look at it. What I've noticed, and especially since I'm an editor now, when I see things in different medium or media, I often things jump out at me. So I can be in edit view on an article for hours and then publish it, and all of a sudden something will jump out at me that's wrong. So sometimes it's, really useful to just look at things different ways, set it aside, just look at things new. So some of the things that you might want to write about, like, is that a problem you've solved, or maybe something new you want to learn. And that's the case with me in Kerberos. I wanted to learn Kerberos, and I couldn't find any articles out there that told me everything I needed to learn. So I started, it wasn't necessarily blogging, but I started writing articles and presenting on Kerberos because I wanted something that had pretty much everything anybody would need to set this up. Now, there are situations, like multiple domains and things like that I didn't cover, but the typical situation I did. And so that suddenly made me like one of the top people on Kerberos, which is, to me, is extremely scary, but nobody else was doing it. So that might be, if you have that thing you want to learn and nobody's tackled it. But that's not to say that you can't write about something that somebody else has already written. You can do that because you're going to look at things a different way, explain things a different way. So just because somebody else has written a book on something doesn't mean you can't write on it as well. Another thing that bothers people is that thing called writer's block. And you want to write, but you just don't do it. You just can't start. You don't know what to start. You look at a blank Word document for 15 minutes and you don't know what to do. So my advice for this, a couple of things. Either put writing on your calendar, and I have a friend, one of my authors who writes for Simple Talk. He always works on his writing on like Wednesdays for half a day. He puts that on his calendar. He's always going to work on Wednesday on writing. And one of his articles that we published about a year ago has been the most popular article that we had in that entire year. It was pretty cool. But just sit down and do it. Put it on your calendar. Maybe it's something on Saturday morning or Sunday morning, or whatever, on Wednesday afternoon, whatever it is, put that on there. And even if you don't have any ideas, just sit down with a Word document and start typing. I have to put out about 4 editorials per month. I'm not Steve Jones. Steve Jones can come up with one every day. I don't know how the man does it. I think he's a robot for some reason. I don't know how he does it. But I have to come up with 4. And I'm like, I struggle to come up with the ideas. But it's like the week before Simple Talk comes out, or it's my week to do Database Weekly, or I have the Women in Tech newsletter coming out, and I have to come up with something. I just sit down and just start typing and just whatever's coming out of my brain. And all of a sudden, maybe I start seeing a theme and I'll put it together as an article, and maybe I'll delete half of it. It doesn't make sense, but I think it's just sitting down and doing it. That's the way to get around writer's block. Just do it. So let's talk a little more about blogging. This is my blogging site, my poor neglected site that is AuntKathySQL.com. My poor neglected site, because since I've been working for Redgate, my whole job is reviewing articles and writing articles. And so my poor blog gets kind of pushed aside. But there are lots of free ways to do it. So I started with a free site, WordPress.com. So there's a couple of different ways you can do WordPress. You can either have a WordPress server. I'm not sure what all the options are, but I know at Redgate, that's what's running Simple Talk and SQL Server Central. They're running on WordPress. And we have the WordPress servers, and we have people that are experienced in programming those and setting them up. What I did for my Aunt Kathy site is I just went to WordPress.com and created a site. And there's different plugins and things that you can use, but you can only use what's offered to you. You can't go in and add additional plugins. There are some you can purchase, I guess. The only upgrades, I did upgrade my site because I wanted it my own URL instead of, whatever it was, AuntKathy.wordpress.com or whatever it was going to be. So I have my own URL, which was an upgrade, but I'm sure it cost me less than $100 a year. It's really not much. I pay for 2 URLs and the upgraded site, and I'm sure probably altogether, I should have looked up the prices. It's not much, but I could have continued blogging there for free if I had felt like it. SQL Server Central is also a place for blogging that can be free. And one of the benefits of SQL Server Central is that you are likely to get more eyes looking at it right away. I can say that my own site, I've never really tried to market it that much, so I don't get a ton of hits on it. Usually if the day I publish something, I go ahead and push it out to Twitter and Facebook to let people know, and LinkedIn, let people know that I've done something, and I might get a lot of hits that day. But typically I don't. What's really odd is that there are a couple of articles that are something like, what does, I can't even remember what it was, something mean? What does XYZ mean? And even though those articles have been around, I don't know how many years, 6 or 7 years, they continue to get the most hits all the time. So one thing you might do, I know there's a whole art and science on working with Google and Google searches, but what I found, if you kind of match what people are actually typing in, people are going to type in something like, what is a materialized view? What is that? It might come to your blog post because that's exactly what they typed in. Domain names are really inexpensive. I think they're less than like $20 a year. And make sure you promote, as I mentioned, promote out on Facebook and LinkedIn, wherever you can make sure people know about what's going on. And some people's blog, partly because they're brilliant people, people like Kendra or Kendra Little or Grant Fritchie that I work with. Their blogs are very, very popular. Part of it's because they're amazing, but they also blog very frequently. You are in control of blogging. You don't have to worry about someone telling you you can't do this, you can't do that. You are in control. Except that you need to check with the company that you work for. I have one writer who's writing quite a bit for me right now, but when she first started, because she works for a financial trading company, I guess, she had to check with management. She has to run everything by the attorneys at her company. So you have to be really careful and make sure that it's okay. Where I used to work, I did that for a few things, and finally my manager said, "You know what you're doing. You're not sharing anything proprietary or anything about our company, so that's fine. Just, I trust you." So the next type of writing could be articles. And over on the right, there's a few places that articles are published, and articles are really going to be a bit more formal than blogs. So in this case, you will probably be submitting an article and someone may edit it. I can vouch for Simple Talk. I edit everything at least twice. I go through and set up the environment. If it's a particular environment, I go through all the code, make sure everything works. If it's something that I cannot handle, then I find someone to tech review for me. For example, I've got a really cool series right now on Simple Talk on storage. And I was like, wow, this is going to be over my head. So I don't know if I can say who it is yet, but I got a prominent member of the community who knows a ton about storage to tech review those articles for me. I'll have to ask him if it's okay if I share his name, but I didn't. So haven't yet. So I'm not really sure I know SQL Server Central, Steve does tech review. I took over for him while he was on sabbatical. It's not as highly edited as Simple Talk, and I can't really vouch for the other ones, Database Journal, and there might be some other places. So often they're reviewed. You definitely have less control. On Simple Talk, people can send me articles and I can say, I don't really want to publish this article. It's just a bunch of headings and definitions. And sometimes you do get paid for writing articles. So at Simple Talk, we pay $350 for a full-length article. It's easier to write articles than it is to write books because the deadlines are not as crazy, and you also get paid per article instead of for the whole thing. And this is one thing I've seen quite a few authors do for me is they have a cool presentation. Let's turn that into an article. So if you're also a presenter, that would be a cool thing to do. Articles might lead to books. Sometimes, and I'm trying to get my manager to let me do this more. Sometimes we have a series of articles, either on SQL Server Central or Simple Talk, that kind of lends itself to a book, or you might get noticed by someone putting a book together. That was what happened to me. My very first book that I worked on was because I had written an article on SQL Server Central about DTS. If you remember, is that even it? The thing before SSIS. Was it DTS? I can't even remember. It's been so long since I thought about it.
It was DTS,
but, it was so Brian Knight was looking for authors that he thought would be good to help him with this SSIS book. So that's how I got kind of discovered. It completely changed my life. So let me stop here, and Kevin, and I keep forgetting to ask if there's any questions. Any questions so far?
So there haven't been any questions so far. Anders mentioned making $50 for an article on SQL Server Central once. There was some discussion about massive open online courses. little bit of that as another route. So yeah, that looks like that's
Yeah, so the open online courses, meaning videos, which I can also talk about because I've done that too. But yeah, I've done courses for Pluralsight, and I have made good money on Pluralsight, much more than writing. However, I really like, for at least for me, I like writing better.
okay.
I think so. I wrote all the articles that I wrote for SQL Server Central back in the day. I got $25, but he has increased the price. I think it's like 150 now. So that's really a good place to get started. Especially if you want to jump right to articles and skip the blogs. SQL Server Central is a fantastic place to get started. And Steve understands that a lot of times people get started there and move on to other things. He's not going to get his feelings hurt about that at all. So, and I just have to say, I just feel like Steve has been my mentor even before we worked together. Years and years, such a great person and really helped me get my start writing. So I'm paying that forward to anybody who will listen to me about writing. So getting involved with a book project, this is a bigger deal, really a bigger deal. So I suggest that you start out with articles and or blogs. You really need to have some experience writing. What I really hate is when I hear from people who are working on their first book project, probably not as the lead author, probably just contributing a chapter or two. That's really not that difficult. But they complain and they say, "Oh my gosh, it was so hard to do. I'm never doing this again." And then what I think is that everything that you try to do that's new is difficult at first. I know you probably don't remember learning how to walk, but and I barely remember my own kids learning to walk, but once I got grandkids, I paid more attention for some reason. I remember my little grandson, he's 14 now, but I remember him learning to walk. He was about 10 months old. He was an early walker, and he's taking steps, and then he fell flat on his face. And, when that happens, as a grandma, it just breaks your heart to see your baby get hurt and fall down. But it wasn't 5 minutes later, after his tears were dried, that he was up trying to walk again. If he said, "You know what? This is too hard. I don't want to walk." Babies don't do that. For some reason, as we grow up, we start deciding things are too hard and we don't keep at it. I can say my very first writing experience for a book, that SSIS book, was really, really hard. Even just 2 chapters was really hard to do. But then writing got easier for me, and obviously I kept up with it, and I really love it. I just, for a while when I was just doing the consulting stuff, I only worked part-time, and I would just write a book, and then I'd do a Pluralsight course, and then I'd write a book, back and forth like that. And I just really loved it, and I had, more time to really work on it. So how do you get noticed? The cool thing today is that you have things like Twitter where the community is all interacting and people get to know each other online and get to be friends in some cases without ever even meeting in person. So if you see maybe authors talking or uh, you know maybe let them know. What happened with me as far as bringing on authors onto my projects is user group meetings. It was kind of fun. I was working on the windowing function book, and I went to a St. Louis user group meeting, which is where that's my user group. And I was talking to one of the guys there, and telling him what I was working on. His name is Clayton Groom, telling him what I was working on. And he's like, you know what? I have a customer who did not want to use analysis services. And I was able to give them everything they wanted. And I used windowing functions a ton in that project. I'm like, whoa, how would you like to write a chapter in my book? So I brought him on as a co-author, and he wrote one chapter. And then when I was writing the second edition, which was last year, and I was at another user group meeting, this time I had traveled to, where was I? Albany, New York, and ran into another person. And it was kind of funny because I was tech reviewing a book he had written, and I'm not sure how to say his last name, Edward Pollock, maybe. But anyway, I should know since we've done so much stuff together. He
Yeah, it's
started
Pollock.
telling me, huh?
It is Pollock.
Pollock? Okay. Um, so he starts telling me about how he gives this presentation and he has all this sports data and does all kinds of things. And I'm like, whoa, do you want to write a chapter? So I have both of those as co-authors. And it was just because we were talking. So you never know where that can lead. Again, start by contributing one chapter. That's how I got started, just contributing 2 chapters. First, I was asked for 1, but then I ended up doing 2. And that's an easy way to get in. I would really not suggest starting as the lead author. I think that will turn you off. I think that is very hard. And of course, when you've got a book project, you've got deadlines. And I know the very first book that I was the lead author on, I had to write 3 chapters by a certain deadline, and I wrote those 3 chapters and turned them in, and then the editor, this was at A Press, did not like the 3 chapters, and so I had to start over. Well, then another deadline came up, and I was still rewriting those first 3, and they're like, "Hey, you're getting behind," and I'm like, "But don't you remember? You just asked me to rewrite these 3." So, I think now, since I've been writing for them a long time, my deadlines, I can kind of push back if deadlines are not good for me. But I think especially when you're first getting started, they're going to be pretty strict about the deadlines because they've been burned so many times by authors who say they will write and then they don't follow up. So that is something to think about. You've got to have the time to do it, and not everybody does. You'll have less control. If they can dictate some things to you. Um, again, I think once you write for them a while, you've got more say. And writing a book is an ultimate bucket list item for just about everybody, not even tech people. I want to write a book. That's one of the things I want to do before I die. Okay, so let's talk about money. I mentioned, blogging. I guess some people do make money for blogging if they are sponsored in some way. Have not done that. um, the articles, I know that SQL Server Central pays $150. I pay $350 for regular length and $200 for editorials, which gets me off the spot of having to come up with them all the time. And the way the books work is that you will sign a contract and there will be a certain amount. And I can tell you that the amount that they're paying for books just keeps getting lower and lower and lower. My first book that I was actually the only author on, I got paid an $8,000 advance, which is unheard of in tech books right now. Maybe somebody can get that much, not me. But what that means, that advance means they give you that money. Right now, I'm typically getting about 1,000 to 2,000 somewhere in there per book. That advance means that they're kind of betting that that's about the amount of royalties that you'll earn. And so every like 3 months or 6 months, whatever the company does, they will send you a statement. I have to confess, I can't make heads or tails out of the statement usually. I'm just kind of trusting them. But eventually, you earn royalties every time, but that chips away at that advance. And eventually you break even and start making money. So this is kind of crazy. My first book, my beginning T-SQL book that I wrote in 2009, I believe I just broke even on that about a year ago. I don't know why people are still buying that old book, but you can still buy it. So now I'm getting a little bit extra money on that. At this point, I think I've got 5 titles on APRUS. Every single one of them has made the advance. So I'm actually making royalties on all of them. So this is the first year that my royalty checks are really good. One thing that I'm really surprised about, the Windowing Function book, second edition, came out right about October of last year, and it's already made the advance. The only thing that I can figure is that somebody must have bought, maybe Microsoft or somebody must have bought like 1,000 of those in bulk. I have no idea why I'd be making royalties on that already. So that's pretty cool. So again, if you get that advance, you get your book turned in, you get that advance, you may never see another dime. That may be it. If your book sells okay, at least enough to make that advance, you will see additional money, but it might take a long time. I received one check earlier this year for $900, and I was like, whoa, I can't believe it that I made that, because typically I might get nothing. It's got to be over like $100 or they won't even send it. Typically I won't get anything, or maybe I'll get a couple of $100 quarterly. So I was really shocked when I got 900. So it's not that you won't make any, but don't quit your day job. Definitely don't. Okay. So you can also self-publish a book, and there are some ways to do that. Here's the kind of the differences. The publisher, if you go with a publisher, they are in charge of that. They will also have project management. I have an editor and I have a project manager at APRUS that I always work with. There are editors and artists. They pay a tech reviewer. They pay artists to take your screenshots and make them look better. They will take care of marketing. They'll take care of publicity. They will take care of printing and ebooks, and will give you a royalty advance. If you self-publish, you are in charge. Everything is up to you. You've got to figure everything out. They aren't going to have all these people behind the scenes doing things for you. You may have to pay some money up front to get your book published. There are some self-publishing companies out there. I know one of my students last year worked for a publishing company, and they helped people with self-publishing. You might end up making more money than if you go the official publisher route. Kindle on Amazon has a way to publish books. And what's really odd is I went out to look for this book today on Amazon and could not find it. So you can go out on Kindle and you can, upload your book, put it all together. They might have a template or something. I'm not really sure. And you can sell it on Amazon. So what some of you may know Jason Strait. What Jason did is he wrote a series of blog posts, 31 days of SSIS. People would look at his post and kind of be his tech reviewers. They would say, Jason, I think you really misspoke on this second paragraph here, or whatever it was. So then he could go ahead and take that advice as his tech review. Then he went ahead and uploaded the whole thing as a Kindle book and sold it for $3 a copy. And he told me that he over years, and this one's been a while, it's probably so outdated. Over the time, he made about $6,000 or $8,000 on this. And what's really kind of crazy is this was content that you could just read for free on his website, on his blog site. So that's kind of cool. Let me show you what that book looks like. I don't have the PDF that you would download if you bought it, but he sent me the Word document. So you have your table of contents. It's automatically made for you. You've got your header and footer. So I assume that he probably used some kind of a template to get this done. Oh, I thought I could click, so he's got his screenshots. So he did a nice job on this. It looks pretty good. So that is an option. There are some writing tips. Think back to your courses in high school and college on writing that you took. Think about those things that you learned. And there's also some tools that can help. So Grammarly is a tool that you can use somewhat for free. I went ahead, since I'm an editor, and I go ahead and get the subscription because there's some things in there that I want to check, like for plagiarism and some of the more advanced tools with it, but you can typically use it for free. I will show you a demo of that. And I can say that it does give a lot of suggestions, and I probably accept about 25% of those suggestions. It has come up with some really good advice, and I can't say that I'm the best person in grammar, or I'm definitely not in spelling. I'm one of the worst spellers ever. So Grammarly does help me quite a bit. I feel like I was better at English grammar than I am at spelling, though. I was pretty good at that at high school because it was kind of formulaic. There are certain rules, and I like just like coding. I like following certain rules and behaviors. One of the things that you might want to avoid is choppy short sentences. That's one of the things I see a lot. Sometimes with authors, I will get paragraph after paragraph and never see a comma. That's very annoying to read. You might do that occasionally for effect, but in general, you want to be careful about that. Conversely, avoid long run-on sentences. I do a lot of taking a whole paragraph that's one sentence and breaking it down and still having it make sense. I haven't had anyone complain yet about me doing that. Typically, the articles that I get, a lot of them are English as a second language, and these people are amazing, but sometimes I have to kind of clean it up. Even the native American, native English, or native, people from US that I'm used to, or people from the UK that I'm used to, even then, technologists sometimes need help with writing. And so I do a lot of helping them with that and helping things read better. This was the one thing I learned from high school and college, creative writing. Avoid using that same word multiple times in a sentence or paragraph. And I see that a lot in the in the documents that I get from people. Avoid switching voice or tense. So one thing that drives me nuts with writing is I'll hear something like, when you do this, I can see that our code is, whatever, where they keep switching. So what I typically do is I get rid of all the we's and let's and us and change most of the articles, is not all of them, but most of them, especially if they're giving instructions, like I'm teaching you. I don't say we are going to learn, you will learn. That's one of the things that drives me nuts. So it just kind of depends on the type of articles. Some authors don't switch it back and forth the very first time you use it. In regards to creating tables with widgets 5.0, we can create tables right in the SXMDKS, and I can see the table when the creation project is actually finished. And just like I have always dreamed a creation process could be when we started working with databases and mobile apps. Again, a really, really terrible long run-on sentence. The word actually will show up in every paragraph sometimes, and I get rid of, I'll let an author have one or two of those, but I typically leave those out. Um, the other thing is this, what I don't know what to really describe it, where like almost every sentence starts with a prepositional phrase. Um, a lot of times I'll just get rid of this part, or I'll rearrange the sentence so that, it's later in the sentence, but I don't really have to say in regards to. I see that a lot. Um, I kind of feel like the sentence is twisted around. And what did that say? I had always dreamed. So, yeah, the Grammarly is really picky on verbs, pickier than I am, I think, on the tenses. And it's been so many years since I studied it. Maybe it would be better if I did. So here's one where we've got the monotonous passage. We haven't got a comma in sight, and we've got all these choppy sentences. So that's kind of bad. The other thing, here's a graphic, an image. It's really nice to have image, but when you are drawing attention to something, make sure you have a nice rectangle. This looks really ugly. Make sure you have a nice rectangle pointing out what you want to point out. And also, here I'm talking, and all of a sudden there's an image, and what I would suggest is always talk about the image. Say something about the image, and then you show the image. Let's see. Here's one with just a comma missing. Again, I'm seeing commas where they don't belong and missing where they do, so that would be another one for me. Here's an example where steps are skipped, I feel like. I'm creating a new project. I don't know what language I'm using. I don't know what this code is going to be about. Have more of an introduction. Is that the end of it? That's the end. So those are just some things that I look at. Again, reading it out loud, throwing it up to Grammarly, just making sure that you describe everything that it talks about. Just don't have random figures that, like, what is this? So, for those of you listening today, I'd like to extend an offer, a couple of offers. If you feel like you are ready to write a book, this means that you have written blog posts or articles, and you've done more than just a couple, you've done a few, and you have an idea for a book. I would be glad to make an introduction to Apress for you. And I have done that with a few people, and they've gone on to write books. The other offer is to write for Simple Talk, to just write articles. And so let's say that you wrote that I published 10 articles on Simple Talk. That would be $3,500, which is more than you would get for writing a book. And a book might even be, need even more than that. So it's a good deal. So you can reach me at this email address. Sorry, my last name is so long. And mention that you watched this presentation. I do have a couple of people that I'm mentoring. I'm helping them. I'm helping one person, actually two of them, get towards MVP, and helping them with with looking at their stuff and just kind of being a mentor, but I would probably be willing to do that for a couple more people as well. So is there any more questions? I thought I heard some voices.
Let's see if there are questions. So, unfortunately, we had my daily internet outage right when
Oh
you were
no.
demoing Grammarly. So, it
Oh
kind of
no.
picked it back up in progress. Are there any questions from anybody so far? None. But I did drop your email in chat so that anybody who was interested could copy paste that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just such a long. I would like it to just be Kathy K. That would be cool if it was just Kathy K. But companies don't let me do that. I think that's the end. Yeah, that's the last one. So some people have taken me up on these offers, as I have given this talk a few other places, and just in general, people that I've met at past summit or other places in the community, I've helped them get started writing, and or even if you want to start a blog and you want to run a couple of I won't, review all of them, but if you want to run the first couple that you write by me before you publish it, I would be glad to do that as well.
Yeah,
But
and
thank you so much, Kevin, for letting me talk tonight. This is obviously one of my favorite topics. Not that
absolutely,
I
we're happy. We're happy to. So Mala's in chat. She says, highly recommend writing for Kathy. She's among the most
thank you.
patient teachers ever.
Thank you.
Raymond says this was inspiring. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, Mala and I have worked together quite a bit on things, so um but yeah, I think with Simple Talk especially, what I like to say is we get the articles, they're very polished before we publish them. Sometimes it's frustrating for the authors, but you know, very rare that they would not be happy once we're done.
Yeah, yeah. Solomon says thank you. Andrew says thanks again for your book on windowing functions.
Yay.
He's apparently one of the many people who bought it.
Evidently. Yeah.
Maybe he bought the 1,000 copies. I could
You
see
bought
him
a
doing it.
1,000 copies. Yeah. That was also one of those situations where I did not think I could write that book because Itzik wrote this book on windowing functions. And, a friend at past summits, I guess it was around 2012 or 13, he said, "You should write a book on windowing functions." I'm like, "Oh no, I cannot do that because Itzik wrote a book on windowing functions." And then later I'm like, "Wait a minute, I can write one too. I'm not going to copy what he wrote." And I explain things completely differently than he does, and I come up with my own examples. And in my books, I thank him. you know, the first edition, I think I thanked him in two places, and I think in the second edition, I thanked him at least once. So I thank Itzik for teaching us, but I did write my own book.
There's definitely room for more than one person. Any topic.
Definitely, because we're all going to explain things a different way.
So it looks like that wraps up the questions from chat. Thank you again so much for presenting tonight. We definitely appreciate this. Is there a place where people might be able to get a copy of the slides?
I can post it on my blog, or I can either post it on my website or I can send them to you. What would be better?
I'm good with either one.
I could put them on my GitHub.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good place to put them.
yeah, I need to do some follow-up blogs on presentations that I've given lately. I will put it on. I might end up throwing them out on GitHub just to have a solid place where they stay. But
Perfect.
I'll put something on because can't remember if my GitHub is just slash Kathi Kellenberger, probably. I can't remember exactly right now, but I'll put something out on AuntKathySQL.com right after this. I'll go ahead and spend the rest of my evening writing a blog post. Way to, that'd be a way to practice what I preach, right?
Didn't intend to give homework, but
Yeah.
okay, thank you again so much for your presentation this evening. And thank you everybody for checking into the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. We'll be back next week with our data science session. Brian Shalloway will be talking to us about database connectivity with R. Until then, everybody have a great evening.
Thanks a bunch. Bye.